Hey, you want to give us a hand converting a White Scars Primaris lieutenant? Let's give him an Eastern theme. We'll start by making his power katana. Yep, that's right, we're going to give him a power sword, but we're going to make it like a samurai sword or a katana. We'll base this guy off a multi-part intercessor, but we will need a few extra little bits and pieces from the old bits box. What we've got here is a Primaris Reaver arm. That's the arm pulling the sword from the scabbard. We're just going to chop the end of it off. And we've got a blade from the Skaven Doombell kit. And the first thing we're doing is we're just joining these two pieces together. Snipping a nice little angle off that blade so that we can attach these two pieces together. Now you don't have to use that particular Skaven blade, you could use any other blade. And of course it's not actually going to be a blade, we're creating a scabbard here for the katana to be housed. So we're just using some plastic glue and we're going to attach these two pieces together. And when we do so, we're going to make sure that we do it cleanly and we're not fiddling around with it because we want this to be as strong as possible. So we're going to get it on there like this, and we're just going to quickly check that the pieces are straight, and we're not going to fiddle with this too much because the more you fiddle with this kind of thing, the weaker that joint will be, and we need that to be strong. We'll check the level, the line of it here, using the grid on our desk. This little cutout section in here is good. This is going to help us brace these two pieces. We're going to fill it with glue and we're going to plug it with a piece of plastic. That's going to make it nice and strong. Let's plop him down safely on a blob of blue tack. Here's our little piece of plastic. Just snipped it off a piece of sprue. We're going to cut it down to shape and then we're going to test it to make sure it fits. So this piece is going to help glue those two pieces together. So we're going to fill it with glue and we're going to pop him in like this. And it doesn't look pretty, but that's okay. This is just a support. We're going to fill those gaps and then we're going to sand it down nice and smooth. Let's go and whack some more glue in there. Just pile it up. Get some extra strength. Let that glue seep down those cracks. Make it nice and strong. Let's make sure we let this dry for a good amount of time, a couple of hours at least. Here it is, Milliput. This is my box. It's pretty ratty. It's seen better days. It's okay. What this stuff is 2-part epoxy resin. We got yellow and darker yellow in it. We've just got to mix these two colors together until it's one solid yellow color. We can just dip our finger in a bit of water there. Just helps make this go smooth because this can be a little bit crummy, a little bit powdery or something. But as soon as you mix it with a bit of water, it changes the consistency of it quite dramatically. So let's just roll out a little sausage and put it in here where these little jagged bits are on the Skaven blade, because we don't want that. We want this nice and smooth. It's not even going to be a blade, is it? It's just going to be a scabbard. So let's just put that on there, and we'll get our sculpting tool and start working it into those gaps and make sure that we press it right in there, so there's no little air bubbles or anything like that. Simple stuff here. We're just smoothing it down, rubbing it down, making it sort of the basically the same shape as the plastic around it. Just filling a gap here, plug in those holes. The end of the Skaven blade has a few little nicks in it. We'll make sure we fill those bits up too. And this doesn't have to be pretty at all. This is not neat. We're just, like I said, we're just filling up the holes, and we're gonna file this down later. We just need to make sure that there's no holes left. We're gonna fill up this little cutout down the bottom of the blade, just so that we're getting that kind of katana, that traditional katana blade. That's what we're going for. We want to give this White Scar a Japanese or an Eastern theme. I just really like the idea. Like, that's what I mean. I even had a dream once. Like I had a dream. Like I wanted to make a white scar with a samurai sword. I've never seen it before. Have you ever seen a Space Marine with a samurai sword? Anyway, we're going to put him down and let him dry. And while we're doing that, we're going to glue this body together. And while we've still got some of that Milliput out, I want to show you how I like to fill up these gaps that you get in the armor. So we're gluing this piece together right here, and we're getting some gaps that we need to fill. We're just going to take a bit of this Milliput, stick it on our thumb, dip our little tool in the water, and we're going to mix some water into this. And this is amazing stuff. You can pack the water into this, and it turns it into a bit of a sludgy type, a paste. So we can put this on the model where the gaps are that we need to fill, and just massage it into those gaps. And because it's so smooth and has been thinned down with a bit of water, it just fills them up really nicely for us. I promise you, it's a true story that the idea for a samurai sword wielding Primaris Marine came from a dream. I woke up in the morning and I went, I'm making that model. Have a look what's going on here. We're using a paintbrush. This is an old paintbrush, and we've dipped it in some water, and we're using this to smooth the Milliput. You can get the stuff so smooth by using a paintbrush that you won't even need to sand it one little bit, which is really handy for the sides of the torso here. So these gaps are completely filled now, and the job's finished. Don't need to sand it or anything. We've left the katana to dry overnight, and it's now rock hard. We're going to begin shaping it. We'll begin slicing some little slithers off, and we're not cutting much off at a time, just a tiny bit. If we cut too much off at a time, we'll risk cracking it or doing some damage. So just slicing off a little bit at a time here. We've got a very rough shape now, looking a little bit more like what it's supposed to look like. Now we'll begin scraping it down for the last little bit, using the back of the scalpel and just scraping it and making it nice and smooth, shaping it to what we want. Making sure we're really careful, especially at this part. This is the actual blade, and this is going to be a real feature of the model. So we're being really careful not to dig that blade into the plastic and do any damage. We'll make sure we try and match the angle of the scalpel that we're using to the blade, so we keep the same angles that are sculpted into the plastic. We're just going to cut out a little bit of this section here and make it a little bit more of a curve, following the katana shape that we're after. Switching to a bit of a file. We're just going to go back and forth between a few tools here just to work on the shape. We're using files. We're going to use some sandpaper, scalpel. This is my wife's emery board. Don't tell her I took it. Just got to be patient with this. Just going back and forth between our tools and sanding it down, filing it down, scraping it. We're doing all the things, aren't we? Milliput is actually very good stuff to sand. Some other putties don't sand as well. They're kind of a little bit tacky or rubbery or something. Milliput goes kind of like wood in that you can sand it really easily and it just kind of sands into a dust. Speaking of tools, let's make our own tool. Here we've got a sculpting tool, and we're just sticking it to some sandpaper that's got a sticky back. We're cutting out this shape. Check it out. Now we've got a little mini sander with a flat, hard edge so that we can sand the blade. It's perfect. It's perfect size to get that little bit of the blade there and make it nice and smooth. Let's do a little bit of work on the grip of this katana. We'll chop this little knob off. We don't need that. It's nice, but we want a two-handed katana. So we're getting rid of that, and we'll smooth that area down. Then we're going to drill a hole through the center of the hand, basically where the center of the hilt or the grip will be. And we'll just clean up that hole. Now we've got some 22 gauge square wire. We're going to crack a bit of this out and put it in that hole using some super glue. Just put a little bit on the end and put this in the hole. And we'll make sure it's centered. We'll look down the center of the sword and make sure it's in the center. We'll just snip this bit of the guard off. We're going to make a new guard. So we're going to cut some microscopically thin pieces of plastic. There they are. We're going to pick it up with our paintbrush. That's how small they are. Using the static of the brush to hold it. And we're just gluing that on the edges here. We're going to glue one on each side of this guard. Once they're dry, we can trim the corners off just to make it a bit more of a rounded shape. Like a traditional katana, this guard is going to be kind of oval shaped. Then we're going to get out the old Milliput and make this guard a little bit nicer. We're going to fill up the gaps in it, and as well as we're going to add a little bit of volume to it so that we can sand it back and round it and shape it so that it looks the way we want. We're keeping it nice and wet with our brush there, dipping it in the water all the time just so the Milliput doesn't start drying out and getting a bit hard to work with. Gets a bit crummy and starts falling apart. Just hit it up with some water. We're also going to add a little bit of volume to this part of the katana. So what we're doing here is we're just going to use our scalpel to start scratching up some holes so that when we put this Milliput on here, it's going to grip onto those holes. We can push this Milliput into the holes, and it's basically just going to be a bit stronger because we're going to file this down. We only need a fraction of a millimeter because I just felt that this part of the sword was just dipping in a little bit and I wanted to plane it out a little bit, make it a bit flatter. So when we start sanding this down, it's going to be absolutely very thin. So by just drilling in some holes and some scratches with our scalpel earlier, it just gives that Milliput something to grab onto. So we've added a bit of volume to the guard here, as well as the katana scabbard. We're going to let that dry overnight. Now that it's dry, let's get back to the old filing, sanding, scraping situation. Yep, we're just going to start sanding that back down. Nothing to it. Just make sure we don't go too far and undo everything that we just did. We just wanted that volume, that tiny little bit of volume. We also put a little bit of putty on the side here just to fill up any kind of imperfections where that joint was. You could see a little bit of gappage. We don't want gappage. We'll start filing down scraping down the guard here, and we're going to start shaping that up, making it nice and round. We want a nice oval shape. We're much happier with the shape of that katana scabbard now, aren't we? Oop. Getting some more volume on there, on that guard. Still weren't quite happy with it. There was a few little holes, so we're just putting it on again, putting on some more Milliput, smoothing it down with our brush. Wait a few more hours, maybe overnight, and then we can sand it back down again. I guess I'm a bit of a back and forth type operator here, but that's okay. We're just gradually refining it, and it's just getting better and better each time. Let's get some Procreate. I don't know if you've ever used this stuff. It's much like green stuff. It's also a 2-part epoxy, just like Milliput and green stuff. I wanted to use it for the grip here just because it's a bit more tacky and rigid. It holds its form a little bit better. We're just putting on a rough shape. If we were to use Milliput for this, I fear it would just crumble and fall away a little bit. The square wire helps in this situation. I like to use that square wire for sculpting over because since it's got 4 corners, it helps the putty to hold onto it. It can be a bit hard to manage when the wire is round and you're pushing that putty around and it just starts spinning around the round wire. Having some square wire just helps hold it in place for us. Once everything's dry, we can get back to scraping, sanding, filing. We're going to get back to the guard here. Let's fix this up. Let's get this good once and for all. We'll crack out the old homebrew sander here and we'll do a nice job sanding this guard. Let's begin the painstaking task of sculpting the actual straps on the grips. We're just going to start with rolling out a bit of a sausage and we're just going to press it onto the grip. We'll start at the top and we'll work our way down. Here we're using a bit of a rubber type tool. It's actually called a color shaper, but I use it for sculpting. It's basically a paintbrush with a little rubber end, and we can use that to get things nice and smooth when we're sculpting. Next, what we've got to do is we're going to cut out a little triangle shape. Tiny little triangle shape from the top and the bottom of this strap. Right in the center, and we're going to do it on both sides of the grip. Let's add another sausage and begin the next strap. Going to do exactly the same thing, just smoothing it out, making it flat and as neat and as clean as possible. And this time when we're cutting out the triangle shapes, we're going to cut out an X instead. We're going to draw an X, just like so. Now we can scrape that triangle from the bottom, get rid of it, and we can get rid of the triangle from the top. And now what's going to happen is that when we start adding straps, we're going to get diamond shapes between the straps. So the two triangles butting up next to each other, making a diamond shape. Add some more straps. Cut out the diamond. Get rid of those little pieces. We don't need them anymore. It's very, very fiddly work. Now we're going for a microscopic sausage. The sort of sausage an ant would eat, I reckon. It's very, very small here. And we're just going to add this to basically where the diamonds meet. And we got in the what this actually is, this little tiny sausage is, it's just a little crease in the straps where they've been twisted, just making them look like they've got a bit of a twist. Using our little color shaper rubber type tool, we're just getting rid of any of those crumbs, making it nice and smooth. Now let's go and add the last strap. Got our little sausage, pressing it on there. And then we'll cut out that last triangle shape. But we'll only cut a triangle on the top of this strap. We won't worry about the bottom of that strap. You can see that those mini ant-sized sausages have created a bit of a nice twist. And here's the finished katana. Most Primaris lieutenants have a bit of something fancy going on their back. So here's an old backpack from the Assault on Black Reach box, I believe. I don't want the backpack. I just want this little Aquila on the top. Let's just thieve it. Thieve it off that old Space Marine backpack. We'll clean him up a bit. And we'll glue him onto the new Primaris backpack. Whoa, that's too much glue, man. Way too much glue. So what we're going to do is we're going to get a paper towel, and we're not going to dab it because it's going to spread it everywhere. We're just going to let the paper towel drink up a little bit of that glue. Just to soak up a little bit of it. No, but we're not going to dab it all over the place. She'll be right. We're all set now. All set to just pop this little Aquila on the top of the backpack. And we're going to quickly check it from all angles, make sure it's straight, it's square, it's not all twisted. And we're going to make any adjustments quick, smart. I love this artist's impression of Jagtar Khan, the Primarch of White Scars. I'm going to use this as a reference for my head. Here we go, we got a really cool head from the Intercessor kit. Let's chop it up. First, what we got to do is we're going to remove the eyebrows. And this is a very, very Caucasian looking head. He's a totally a white fella, this guy. So we're going to make him look a lot more Eastern to suit our Japanese, our samurai type theme that we've got going on. So we're going to remove these heavy eyebrows and we're going to smooth down his big nose, which is cutting away some of this heavy detail, ready to sculpt in some new detail. We want to make sure that we smooth the upper eyelids up to the eyebrows, so we don't have a very heavy eyebrow type situation going on. We just want it nice and smooth, basically a blank canvas, so that we can sculpt the detail that we need to make him look a little bit more Eastern in appearance. We're going to get out the old Milliput again. We'll cut it with a bit of water, make it nice and soft. We'll start pressing this onto his forehead. We're going to make a new forehead for him. He's not going to have such a heavy brow. So using our color shaper, we will start rolling those eyebrows down and smoothing it, blending it kind of into his upper eyelids. Here we've just also quickly mapped out a rough scar, which we'll sculpt in properly later, but I just want to have a rough idea where that scar is going. Same with his mo. Just want to put a real quick mo on there just to see how he's looking. Let's add a little bit of volume to his upper eyelids, and we'll use this sculpting tool to start smoothing them over and shaping them, bringing them towards the center of his nose and around the outside towards his temples, making it nice and smooth. The color shaper is such a great tool to make your sculpting nice and smooth. Let's get rid of his moustache now. And let's chop his mouth off. We're going to re-sculpt this mouth. We're going to make him having a closed mouth. We don't want him screaming his head off. We'll feed him some Milliput. Press it into his mouth. And then we can start smoothing it over and joining it. And then we can start shaping a new mouth and a new chin. Using a scalpel here for some fine detail stuff, and cutting away a little bit of unwanted Milliput. And just very gently what we're doing here, every little touch of any tool to your sculpting, this needs to be very gentle and nice and relaxed, and we're just slowly changing the shape of things, changing the form, just by pushing things and moving things around, rolling things over, cutting things away, adding a little bit of volume when necessary. So yeah, we want to make this soldier calm looking. I didn't like the idea of him holding a samurai sword, yelling his head off. I wanted him to just be calmly assessing his situation, ready to chop some heads in a calm way. Added a little sausage here for the beginnings of his moustache, and we'll just paint it down with a little bit of water, keeping it keeping it nice and wet all the time. This tool is a pin that's been rounded. Just helps you get into some tight situations. Added the second sausage for the other side of his moustache here. And just lightly press it on there and shape it. Could be a bit of a barber to him and give him a nice haircut. Give him a shave. And a bit of a trim on his moustache. This is with a scalpel, and it's just very lightly just cutting away and shaping it. You want nice sharp forms. Like you can see these lips. His lips are quite distinguished. They're not blurry and rounded and indecisive. They're well defined. So you want to try and make your sculpting sharp. Let's go on. Add a proper scar here to the top of his head. I opted for a raised scar rather than a cut, just so it looks like it's a bit more of an old scar, and we can have a bit of fun painting it maybe later on. Added a little scar on his cheek here, just to continue that big scar over his forehead, down across his eye and onto his cheek. So he's been hit by a big bit of shrapnel or something. And then we'll just gradually refine the two scars at the one time, making sure that they kind of look like they're the same scar. Going through all of our different tools. This is a dental tool here. Got a set of dental tools for sculpting. And when we press that sausage onto the top of his forehead to make a scar, we need to make sure we blend it into the surrounding plastic. Otherwise, you can clearly tell that it's just a piece of putty sitting on top of his head. We want to make sure all of our sculpting is nicely blended, and that's where the paintbrush comes in handy. Just hit up that paintbrush with a bit of water and just start painting it, and it will blend it out until it's just absolutely microscopically thin. And here's the basically the finished sculpt. We'll let it dry and we'll do a little bit of tweaking to it. Yeah, he's looking much less Caucasian now. When it's dry, we can smooth down some of the surfaces, make them a little bit more defined. Here we're just scraping away a bit of the lip and the chin, smoothing it down, also making the chin a little bit smaller. He's just missing one thing, this white scar. Bloody top knot. So raided the bits box, and we've got, what have we got here? We've got the Demonette kit. We'll just pinch a couple of those heads, snip off the top knots and see which one we want to use. And then we're going to drill it out and super glue it to a little piece of wire. Then we're going to snip off that little bit of wire to make it just so it's got a little pin. And then we're going to drill a hole in the back of his head, or the top of his head. That way we can sit it into his head, find the right angle and make sure it looks okay before we glue it. So now we're gluing it with a bit of super glue, getting some tweezers and slotting it into his head and making sure we're all happy with it. 100% this fella needed a top knot. Now it's time to make his right arm. Let's use this spare part from the Hellblasters kit. We'll go ahead and chop the gun away from his arm. Then we're going to super glue the katana arm to the body. We're using super glue, not plastic glue, so that we can break it off later on. We want to glue this on only temporarily so that we can build his right arm and it fits perfectly with the body. So there we are, it's just super glued on. And now we can begin fiddling with this right arm and seeing what we need to do. So the first thing we're going to do is we need to bring the body closer. So we're going to chop off this little bit here, change the angle of this arm, bringing it closer towards his body and making his hand, there we go, in the right spot. Now it looks like he's going to be holding on to that scabbard. Let's chop off the hand We don't need that hand. We need to make a new hand. That's right. We're going to make a new hand. I couldn't find the right piece anywhere. So let's just make a new hand from a bunch of hands. Hello. We need this hand. We need this thumb. That's all we need from this piece. Bloody hell. Here's another piece from the Reaver's kit. All we need from this is the top of that hand. Let's chop it. Now we're going to do the same thing. We're going to super glue the right arm in place. We'll just be able to crack that off later on, and because it's super glue. Definitely we don't use plastic glue. And you can see I've marked some little red reference points so I know exactly where I want to put it. So I can just line them up when I glue it on there. Now I've blue tacked the top of that hand in place roughly, just giving a rough idea. Then we're going to need this piece from the Intercessors kit, the little part where it's holding the magazine. Chop off the magazine, don't need that, in the bin pretty much. And we're going to very carefully pry away the fingers. Yes, that's what we need, just the fingers from this piece. It's okay, these are all just spare parts. You'll never use a lot of these parts. So we're just going to chop, we're just going to get into it. I want that finger, I want that thumb. I'm just going to wreck the part just to get it. Just to make the perfect Primaris Lieutenant. There we go, that's what we wanted from that whole piece. Just having a quick look, make sure it's going to work. With a few little tweaks, we can glue it together. Just adding a little bit of plastic glue now. And there's the little thumb we took from the waving hand from before. We're just going to gently put that in place. And by the way, that was the thumb from a left hand going on the right hand. That makes my head hurt a little bit. But, oh well, it works, doesn't it? You can't even tell. This little bit here, we need to fill this. We're going to pack some glue in it first and make it nice and strong. Then we're going to add some Procreate. Just gently push some in there. Make sure it gets right up in it. Get it up there. Push some in this little gap between the fingers here. Just to make it nice and authentic. We can paint that black later on. And now we're going to just gently pry off this arm. We just cracked it there. Cracked it off. And that's what super glue does. It's very brittle, so it just cracks off. And now we've got this whole section here that we can paint all at once later on as a subsection. It also means that we've got a bit more access to sculpt the joint here in his wrist. Firstly, we're going to use our color shaper tool just to smooth it down, make it nice and clean. Then we're going to get into the scalpel and begin just sculpting some lines. And when we're doing this, we don't just want to simply cut a thin line. We want to shape it. We don't want just a thin slit like this. We've got to work it a little bit and make it a little bit nice. Make a bit of a rounded, ridged type look. There we are. This whole piece is basically finished. We just need to chop off this little bit of wire here. And then we're going to sand it. And that's the other good thing about using copper wire. It's so soft that you can sand it smooth. You'd have a hard time sanding a bit of steel wire. Let's begin making a base. I'm using an old coffee card here. Just whatever scrap I had lying around. You can use anything. You can use plastic card. I didn't have any plastic card left, so I got this old coffee card and I just got it out and started drawing the design on it for a bit of an interesting tile, crosshatch tile look. And then I'm just beginning to score it and cut them out. Once the pieces are cut out, we'll just give them a quick sand on each edge, just so that they're nice and clean. Then we'll just smother the base, a 40mm base, with some glue, and just get those tiles on there. 40mm base, 100%. This is a Primaris Lieutenant. He's not walking around on a 25, 32mm base like all the other plebs. He's got his big base. Anyway, let's do a bit of tiling, get them all on there, get them nice and straight before the glue sets. And once it has set, we'll use the edge of a scalpel to gently begin just giving them a light bevel, giving these tiles just a very slight bevel in the corner, just so that they're nice and neat, they're not sharp at all. Then we're going to just hook out this industrial blade to just start chopping around the circumference of the base, just roughly, but as close to the base as you can without doing any damage. And once we get a bit closer, we're just going to scrape it, get it a little bit closer, but we don't want to go hard up against the base until we get to this stage and we can file it. We'd risk digging that blade into the rim of the base and that would just wreck it. So we'll use this file and we're going to try and maintain that angle of the edge of the base when we're doing it. And here we're just going to quickly hit the top with a bit of sandpaper just to make it a bit smoother and more level. Let's get a bit of this stuff out. We'll do a bit of plasterboarding. This is just some gap filler for building your walls and your plasterboard. We're just going to use it just to begin filling this tiny little gap between the plastic card and the base. And we wouldn't use this for anything structural or anything like that. We're just simply just filling up the little gap, and then we're just going to sand it away gently like this, using my wife's emery board. Shh. Pretty sure she's still looking for it. Just going to file it right down until there's basically nothing left. We don't want much of it. We only want it in the gaps. You can see a very small amount of it there between the plastic card and the rim of the base. We'll get our really fine grit sandpaper and just start smoothing it and polishing it, getting it really smooth. Let's tell a little story with our base. We're going to make a scratch-built servo skull, like a little crab version, one that crawls around on little feet. So we're using this little piece here, which is from the Skitarii Infiltrator kit. It's just that claw hand. And we use one of those skulls from that box of about a bazillion skulls. I chose one that's got a bit of a crack in his forehead just because I found it interesting. With this hand, we're just going to shave it down, cut this little palm bit, shape it so that that's where the skull is going to sit. And we can keep putting it on the base and using a bit of blue tack just to find the right angle and see how it's looking, see what other bits we need to shave off. I want this bit here from the Skitarii box. All I want is this little pipe here because it's got that little gadgety node thing on the end, and that's what I want to use. I want to make a pipe coming out of his eye socket, like his lens, his eye has fallen out because this poor little fella is dead. So we're going to drill a hole into the skull, and that pipe, we're just thinning it down a little bit so that it goes into the eye socket nicely. We're just going to fit it and see how it fits. When we're happy with it, what we're going to do is we're going to boil some water. We're going to get that water, put it in a little container, and then we'll put that little pipe, the little hose, in the boiling water for a few minutes, and it will soften the plastic. Make it a little bit softer so that we can quickly take it out of the water like so and push it into the eye socket of the skull, and now we can bend that wire, that rod, to the shape that we want. And we just do a little bit at a time and then put it back in the water and then put it back in this eye socket and bend it a little bit more, and this will help it to not snap. Now we're pushing that pipe down hard onto the base while it's just come out of the boiling water again, so it's nice and soft. And now you can see it's It's got a bit of a curve to it, but it's sitting flat on the base. Now we're going to put some super glue on the base, and using some tweezers we're going to position this little poor dead servo crab. Now I'm going to use some plastic glue, put a little bit in his eye socket, careful not to get it all over the place, and then there's a little bit of super glue on the base, and now we're going to try and quickly position it and press it down hard on the base. This little piece here, we want this. This is from the head of one of the Skitarii infiltrators. We're going to make this into a little lens. Super glue on the base and a tiny dab of plastic glue on the end of that node, and we're going to put that in place, and that's going to be his lens. So the poor little fella, he's dead and his eyes fallen out. This little part here is the thumb of that claw from the claw that we used before from the Skitarii infiltrator kit. We just want to add that thumb to the back of the skull, like it's his fourth leg. We've just cut it to shape, cut it off the wrist, and then cut it to shape so that it fits nicely in to the back of his head. And the last thing we've added is a little piece of curved wire, just for one last little pipe. Now we're going to put a few blobs of super glue on the base, and we're going to attach some rocks, and we're going to paint these later on as rubble that have kind of collapsed from the ceiling. So like this guy might be in some kind of temple or something, and the ceiling's collapsing, and there's a bit of rubble everywhere. So we're going to put some large rocks first in a nice kind of position. Then we're going to put some PVA glue around them, and we're going to sprinkle some dirt on there. The other thing we've put on this base is a few little springs, few broken parts from the servo skull, and those are just little pieces of guitar wire super glued on there. And yeah, by the way, this is just dirt from the garden. I reckon it's the best stuff. I prefer this much more than sand. It's much more in scale than sand, and it comes in different shapes and sizes. So we'll scatter a few more piles of rubble around the base, and then our White Scars Primaris Samurai Lieutenant is finished. Ready to get some paint on him. I've dreamt up something really cool for the next video as well. Until then, hooroo!